everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be talking about a chess opening, the Italian game. This is an extremely common opening for both beginners and for intermediate players, so it's a good one to know. And just like before, guys, please leave a like on the video and subscribe if you already haven't, and leave any comments down below if you want to see any other openings. So without any further ado, let's start the video. The Italian game begins after the moves e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to c4. This is known as the Italian game, and in this position already, right off the bat, Black has two options, or the two most common options are bishop to c5 and knight to f6. In this video, we're going to be covering both of the options, but first let's start with knight to f6. If Black plays knight to f6, then for beginners, what I would recommend is that you go for the knight attack with knight to g5. After this, Black has to play d5 to stop the white bishop and the white knight from taking on the f7 pawn. Then what you have to do is you have to capture the black pawn. In this position, many beginners think that it's okay to capture the pawn with the knight. However, this is an extremely bad, terrible mistake that Black can make. And let's just see why. If Black plays knight takes d5, then White has the powerful knight sacrifice with knight takes f7. After king takes f7, White can play queen to f3, checking the black king and attacking the black knight. This is known as a fork. After the king goes back to e8, Black's best move, White can recapture his piece which he had sacrificed on f7. Now, as you can see, White has 7 pawns, whereas Black only has 6. And the rest of the material on the board is completely equal. This means that White is winning the game because he's up a pawn. And also in this position, White is threatening checkmate on f7 with the bishop and queen, while simultaneously attacking the knight on c6 with his queen and bishop. Black's best reply is queen to f6, both guarding checkmate and guarding the c6 square. After this, all White has to do is capture on c6 twice with his queen and his bishop, and give Black these double isolated c pawns, which will be an easy target later on in the game. In this position, White is completely destroying Black, not only because he's up a pawn, but also because White's pawn structure is completely intact, whereas Black's pawn structure is completely broken up with an isolated pawn on a7, a double isolated pawn on the c file, and an isolated pawn on the e5 square. Along with this, Black also cannot castle because Black had moved his king earlier in the opening. So now, it's just smooth sailing for White, with developing moves such as knight to c3, pawn to d6, d3, and developing the bishop either to e3 or to g5. Then White can just castle and enjoy this game, or this completely winning endgame, with easy targets on the e file, the c pawns, and the a7 pawn. However, you might be wondering what happens if Black does not play knight to c6. Or even better, what happens if Black does not, after e takes d5, what if he doesn't play knight takes d5? What if Black plays knight to a5? This is the best reply for Black, and what White has to do after this is bishop to b5 check, pawn to c6, pawn takes c6, b takes c6, and the powerful queen to f3 move. This may seem like you're hanging an entire bishop, but if Black takes the bishop, then White has queen takes a8, winning an entire rook for the bishop. So Black cannot take back. Instead, Black would most likely play a move such as bishop to d7, after which this is just an easy game for White with a move such as bishop to e2, retreating the bishop, and following the same developing patterns with pawn to d3, knight to c3, and bishop to e3. After this, white will be up a pawn, just like before, and hopefully we'll be enjoying a completely winning game. So, after bishop to c4 in the opening, let's explore the other option that black has, bishop to c5. This is known as the Giuoco piano game. The main line continues with pawn to c3, knight to f6, attacking white's e4 pawn, and pawn to d4, attacking the bishop. As you can see, white already has complete center control with his e pawn and his d pawn. After black captures, you as white have to recapture on d4. And then black will most likely give you a check with bishop to b4 check. Again, this is just the main line of the Giuoco piano game. Instead of moving your king to e2 or to f1, you have to block with the bishop with bishop to d3. Then black will most likely exchange and play pawn to d5, after which you have to capture the pawn, and after knight captures, both sides castle, and this is just an equal middle game in which both sides have winning chances. However, if we were to go back a couple moves, you might be wondering what happens if black plays knight takes e4 instead of bishop takes d2. Well, in this case, can you spot the tactic in 3 moves that can easily win back your pawn? That's right, it's bishop takes b4, knight takes b4, and bishop takes f7. A piece sacrifice which you will easily regain in the next move. After king takes f7, you have to play queen to b3, again forking the knight and the king. And right now, black has to block the check with pawn to d5. After this, white just regains his piece, and black is forced to artificially castle with rook to f8. Then, you as white, all you have to do is just castle your king, and after black moves his king to safety, develop your knight, challenging black's strong knight on e4. This game is a completely equal game, with chances for both sides. However, in my opinion, white is slightly better. This is because white already has his queen developed to a nice square, attacking the pawn on b7. What this means is that it'll be really hard for black to develop his dark square or his light square bishop, because let's say black develops it to f5. After this, the bishop has left the protection of the b7 pawn, so he just hangs the pawn with queen takes b7. This is why white is just slightly better in this position, because it will be difficult for black to develop his bishop. So, after, like I said before, after bishop takes d2, and after these first couple of moves, the game continues normally. White's plan in this position is to control both of the open files on the board, with rook to e1 and rook to c1. What this does is that it controls the c file and the e file, giving white a good game. Something that you should avoid though, as white, is to play queen to b3. Because if white does indeed play queen to b3, then black has to try to attack the d5 knight. Then black has the powerful knight to a5, forking the queen and the bishop. After the queen moves, let's say to c2, then black can easily just capture the bishop on c4, and after queen captures, black is slightly better in this position. So you should try to avoid queen to b3. However, like I said before, this is where the opening ends, and this is where it's up to you to try to win the game. And like I said before, one of the main plans is to control the e file and the c file, and try to gain an attack against the black king by moving your knights to the center of the board, and by moving your queen towards the king side. Obviously not to g4, because right now the bishop covers the g4 square. However, you get the idea. Try to move your queen to f3, possibly to g3, and try to launch an attack against the black king. Other than that, this is the Italian game. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. And if you don't mind, please hit the like and subscribe buttons to help out my channel. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time.